What's good, YouTube? Man, we just freaking watched the craziest video about Mr. Ballen. What I say, man? Rest in peace to the twins, bro. Rest in peace to the twins, bro. Shit is crazy, man. But here it is. This is the final video of his series video, whatever. But damn, that shit was crazy, man. If this is the first one you watched, there's two more you gotta watch. There's two more you have to watch before you watch this one. Cause I'm gonna spoil everything for you. If you do not watch the third video first, you have to watch that one first. Then watch number 2, then watch this one. Okay? But this one says intelligence quotient. Yeah. So man, let's just get right into this video. I'm fucked up right now. Fucked up.
IQ, which stands for intelligence quotient, is a measure of someone's intelligence. To find your IQ, you need to take an official IQ test, which gives you an IQ score. The vast majority of people will score about 100 as their IQ, and so that's considered to be the average intelligence for any given person. But a very small number of people will score somewhere between 130 and 160. And so that's considered to be a very high IQ. Those are very, very gifted people. And then there is an even smaller group of people that score above 160. And so that is the genius class. Anybody who scores above 160 is literally a genius. To give you a sense of just how rare that is, Albert Einstein, who is largely considered to be one of the smartest people to have ever lived, he was not even considered a genius, at least not by his IQ. He was about 160, so right on the cusp of geniusness. But as we will learn from this story, having an exceptionally high IQ does not make you immune to making unfathomably bad choices. In 1991, 31-year-old Jackie Katarik, who had a genius IQ of 170, so she was smarter than Albert Einstein, she graduated from UCLA Medical School with honors. She completed her medical residency, which is like a multi-year apprenticeship for new doctors, at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, which is one of the very best hospitals in America. After that, she opened her very own practice just north of LA in a town called Bakersfield, California, and she also became a part-time professor at her alma mater, UCLA. By all accounts, Jackie was brilliant, she was successful, and she loved what she did, and her patients and her students loved her right back. Fast forward to 2010, Jackie was 49 years old, and she was still running her very successful practice, and she was still teaching at UCLA, and she was in an on-again, off-again relationship with a 58-year-old man named William Moody. While the details of their relationship are not really publicly known, it's fairly easy to deduce from the reporting that came from this case that Jackie and William fought a lot. On Wednesday, August 25th of that year, Jackie was spotted by herself at a Mediterranean restaurant in Bakersfield, California, having some drinks. And then at some point during the night, she called a ride service to pick her up and take her home again. Even though we don't know this for sure, it's assumed she was too intoxicated to drive, and that's why she called the ride service. The following morning, Jackie did not show up for work. Her assistant at her medical practice is the one who noticed Jackie had not shown up, and so when she didn't, she called her boss, but her boss didn't pick up, and so after a couple of failed attempts at getting in touch with Jackie, this assistant called Jackie's boyfriend, William. And so William, he picks up the phone, and when the assistant asks him, "Hey, have you seen Jackie? She has not come into work today," William actually says, "Yes, I saw her last night." William would explain to the assistant that the night before he was in his house by himself in Bakersfield, California, not far from this restaurant where Jackie was last seen, and he said that at some point, unannounced, he saw Jackie pull up in front of his house. And so he could tell from her general demeanor and her look and her pace that she was upset about something, or he just sensed there was going to be some conflict if he went to the door. And so he decided to actually slip out the back door and kind of run away from his property before Jackie could see him. And so he actually left the property and went to a friend's house who was nearby and spent the night with this friend. And so when the assistant called William, William was actually still at this friend's house. He had not been back to his actual property. And so he would tell the assistant that, the last I saw of Jackie, it was late at night. She had pulled up in front of my house, but then I split. So I don't know what she did. I assume she left. But William would tell the assistant that, you know what, I'll go back over to my house and I'll see if she's still there or if there's some indication of where she might have gone. And so William hangs up the phone, he leaves his friend's house and walks the couple of blocks back to his own property. And when he gets there, sure enough, right out front of his house is Jackie's car. Now, William knew his house was locked and Jackie didn't have a key. And so Jackie must just be sitting in her car waiting for him to return. And so William walks up to the car expecting to see Jackie and expecting probably to fight about something. But when he gets up to the car, Jackie's not in there, but her purse, her cell phone, her wallet, that's all over the inside of the car. And so William turns and looks at his house thinking, is she in the house? Did she somehow get in? Is she on the back of the house? And so William just starts yelling out for Jackie as he begins to walk around his house. And so as he goes around towards the back of the house, he's yelling out for Jackie. No one's calling back. And then he reaches the back of the house and there's no sign of Jackie, but he sees there's a shovel on the ground near his back door. And then he looks at his back door and it looks very obviously like someone, probably Jackie, had been using the shovel to try to pry open the back door. Like they were trying to break in, but it hadn't worked. And so William just kind of sees that and then continues walking around the other side of the house. So he's completely walked around the entire property. There's no sign of Jackie. And so he's thinking, okay, I guess she must have gotten in somehow. She's in the house somewhere. And so William goes to the front door, he unlocks his front door, he goes inside, and even though he knows all of his doors have been locked, all the windows are locked, he's kind of on edge because he's thinking she's got to be in here. But he walks through his house and there's no sign of Jackie, and there's no sign that anybody else had been in there since he was last in there. And so he's totally puzzled because it doesn't really make any sense that Jackie's car is out front, but he's thinking, okay, maybe she got here and then she called a ride service and went somewhere else, I'm sure she's fine. So William calls the medical assistant and says, look, her car's here, her stuff's here, but she's not here. I don't know what she's doing. I'll let you know if anything comes of it. The assistant said, I really feel like something's off here and we really do need to call the police. And so William would say, you know what? I think that's a good idea too. Let's just get them involved and make sure she's okay. And so they call the police, and the police start by going to Jackie's residence. But Jackie's not there and there's no sign of her. The neighbors haven't seen her. And so the police go to William's household and they search Jackie's car and they search William's house and the surrounding area right outside. But there's really no clues as to what actually happened to Jackie. And so after the police talked to a bunch of neighbors and friends and family, they just told William and this medical assistant that at this point they just need to wait and that hopefully Jackie will just come out of wherever it is she's hiding or wherever she's gone. Maybe she's upset, maybe she was fighting with William and she's run off somewhere, but we just gotta wait and see what happens. 2 days later, Jackie was still unaccounted for. No one knew where she was. No one had heard from her. No one had seen her when William's friend went over to his house. William, the day before, so 24 hours after Jackie had been reported missing, he had left the country on a prearranged trip. But he was not being looked at as a potential suspect or having anything to do with Jackie's disappearance, and so he was allowed to go. And so this friend had been asked to go to his property to feed his fish. And so he shows up on Saturday, that's 48 hours after Jackie has been reported missing. He goes inside the house and immediately he is hit with this terrible smell inside of William's house. And so he's covering his face and he's walking around the house trying to figure out where the smell is coming from. He thinks it could be the fridge, maybe something's rotting that's fallen out or the door's open or something, but it's not the fridge. He goes to the trash, it's not the trash. He goes to the fish, it's not the fish. He makes his way over to the fireplace and he realizes that's where the smell is coming from. And so kind of reluctantly, he gets down and he kind of smells inside the fireplace, but it's not really coming from the area where the logs would be. It's coming from up in the chimney flue. And so he puts his head down and kind of turns and looks up the chimney, and about 2 feet up the flue, dangling down, are 2 human legs. and they would be Jackie's legs. It would turn out a few days earlier, when Jackie was at that restaurant drinking by herself, she did call that ride service to come give her a ride home, presumably because she was too intoxicated to drive. But before they showed up, Jackie just got into her car anyways and drove to her estranged boyfriend's house. And so she gets there. William, meanwhile, is sneaking out the back and running off to his friend's house. Jackie does not see him. She makes her way up to the front door and presumably tries to knock and get William's attention. But when no attention is given to her and it seems like no one's inside, she decides she's going to try to get into the house. And so the front door was locked, the windows were all locked. She got to the back door and that was locked. So she tried the shovel and tried to pry it open, but it didn't work. And so eventually Jackie climbed up the permanent ladder that's on the back of the house. There isn't much online describing this permanent ladder. It could be a fire escape or it could be some sort of lawn decoration, but there was something on the back of the house that you could climb up if you wanted to. And so Jackie climbed up this permanent ladder and actually got onto the roof. And then when she was on the roof, she walked to the center where the chimney was, and there was this cap over the top of the chimney to prevent things from going into the chimney. She removed the cap and then lowered herself feet first into this chimney. Now, it's unclear how quickly she descended this chimney, but eventually she got stuck because the width of this chimney was not uniform. It started fairly wide at the top and then narrowed as it went down. And so at some point, as she went down feet first, she would have gotten completely wedged. It wouldn't have mattered if her hands were above her head or by her side, because either way, they were useless. She couldn't bend her arms, and there was nothing to grab onto, so her arms couldn't do anything. And then below her, there was nothing for her feet to push onto. And so she was totally stuck. And since William was not in his house, he had left, there was no one there to help her. And so Jackie probably started screaming for help, but as soon as she did that and she exhaled that huge scream, her chest would have constricted from exhaling, and that would have shrunk her chest, making her thinner, and she would have dropped a little bit farther into the chimney. And then when she breathed back in again, her chest would not be able to expand back to its original position because the chimney would be restricting her. It's like this brace that's around her chest that as she gets lower and lower and lower, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And so her lung capacity is shrinking second by second. And as her lung capacity shrinks, she would not have had the lung strength to emit a loud enough sound to get anybody's attention. Basically, she couldn't scream. She couldn't take in a big enough breath to scream out. And so she was just stuck in this totally compromised position in this claustrophobic little chimney where she could do nothing but wait and hope maybe William or someone took notice of the fact that she was in here, even though, again, she couldn't get anyone's attention. And so most likely she would have begun rationing her breaths because, again, every time she breathes out too much, she goes farther and farther, making it harder and harder to breathe. And at some point, starting on Thursday night, she would have heard William in the house. He would have been only a few feet away from her, but she can't make a sound loud enough to get his attention. And we know she was alive by Thursday night because neighbors heard someone faintly yelling help on Friday night. So nearly 48 hours after she got stuck in the chimney, it's believed she was still alive. And those neighbors, when they heard that faint call for help, they assumed it was kids in a nearby pool, and so they didn't do anything about it. When they found out what had happened, they thought, you know what, it was coming from that chimney. That's where we heard it coming from. Jackie would die shortly after the neighbors heard her calling for help because she was dead by the time the friend found her in the chimney the following day on Saturday. Jackie would die from mechanical asphyxia, which is basically suffocation, but it's caused by some physical obstruction. And in this case, it was the chimney. The chimney literally crushed her chest to the point where she could no longer inflate her lungs. It would take firefighters approximately 5 hours to break this chimney down to finally retrieve Jackie's body. No charges were filed against anyone for Jackie's death. It was ruled to be an accident caused by an unbelievable error in judgment by an unbelievably brilliant woman.